give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's good, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Wall Street. Your favorite draft analyst. It's the Draft Deck NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. My name is Corey Tulaba. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Albert Garbage Time Gim. Albert, what's going on, brother?
All is going on. That's a weird answer, but I'm feeling good. I'm excited to be back. But we're at that point now. Pre-draft season, NBA playoffs. My Knicks are up 3-1 against the Cavs.
Yes.
I won't even lie to you, Corey. I told everybody that I thought the Cavs would win in 6, and I'm really glad that I was wrong. And the reverse jinx is still alive. So I'm feeling great. Feeling great.
Man, playoffs have been awesome, man.
Yeah.
They've been awesome, and they tell us so much about, I feel like, how we should be scouting, and that Knicks series. And I think the one that's potentially going to be after it, if things go according to the way, I'm sure the odds makers would favor it to go, it seems like defense is going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not here to break down the NBA playoffs. We are here to talk about the NBA draft and break down what is, I think, been the most contentious prospect between the No Ceilings crew, right? And that's Brice Sensabaugh from Ohio State. Sensabaugh, the 19.64 years old on draft night, listed at 6'6", 235, played 24 and a half minutes per game this year, averaged 16.3 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 2 turnovers, a half a steal, 0.4 blocks, shot it at a 48% clip, 40.5% from deep, 83% from the line, true shooting percentage of 58.7, PER of 26.4, and a box score plus minus of 8.6. He was unranked on the Draft Deck IPO, currently sits at 15th on the latest edition of that, which took place this week or last week. ESPN has him at 18. The Athletic has him at 14. Tankathon at 14. Bleacher Report at 15. The Ringer at 20. No Ceilings at 14. Average stock price of 16 here. So, as I always do, Albert, I'm going to ask you, is Sensabaugh stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
What was the exact number again, Corey?
The average price is 16.
Yeah.
And he ranked 15th on the top 55 draft deck update. So bordering the end of the lottery.
Corey, I feel like for me, it feels just about right. I don't want to say it's too high because I think on my board I had him higher. But I also don't want to say too low either, considering the fact that I had him higher. Just because I can see how other people may perceive him at a lower spot. So for me, I like him right at 16 as like a median outcome. Once again, my personal ranking of him is higher than that, but I get it. If we're considering how everyone feels about him and overall, like, as you mentioned, he is kind of a divisive topic for us at No Ceilings. 16 feels just about right.
Yeah. And you know what? What's funny is, like, you're either in or you're out. And at No Ceilings, we've been passionate about it. Yeah. And I don't think out like, oh, I'm not drafting him. Just like he's either in the 20s or he's in your top 10. But I feel like we have other guys that we like talk about a lot. And maybe we're a little bit more aligned, or maybe we're not, but we're not as passionate as the two subsections. And I feel like you're neutral. You've been neutral on this, but like there's been two subsections of scouts at No Ceilings who are very passionate about their Sensabaugh takes. I think I'm one of them. So for me, it's too low. We talked about him on this feed a couple of weeks ago when Rucker and Metcalf and I were in Portland before you had arrived, when we were at the Nike Hoop Summit, and we did an episode because I think you were, en route called Sell Me This Pen. We were just like basically selling, each other on guys that we were higher on versus the other two guys. And Sensabaugh was the guy that I sold for that episode. And I had said, like, I have him as a potential top 5 guy. I think I say that with the caveat that he does have a history of knee issues. He had 2 surgeries on a meniscus in high school, which I think potentially, probably dropped him down boards a little bit. And then there's also the knee injury that took him out for the very end of this season. So, that I don't love that for him. But if I'm going strictly on talent from what I see out of him, and I know it sounds crazy because you're thinking it's like, all right, so there's the Thompson twins, there's Jarris Walker, there's Cam Whitmore, and then there's this pudgy, stocky. What's the word that you use?
I mean, it depends, but we can go with stocky here.
There's this stocky shooting guard who's like not overly athletic and looks awkward on the court.
Yeah.
And you have him up there in that range, and I'm like, yeah, I fucking do. Because I just think he's so skilled, man. So for me, it's too low. I understand, that there are reservations with a guy like Sensabaugh, and I understand the arguments. But I think my goal and our goal with this podcast is to really, really deep dive on these prospects to help both of us get, a better understanding for ourselves. And I'm going to state my case why I think he's, the prospect, the level of prospect that he is. And then, we'll show some stuff that is probably the reason why some people might have him a little bit lower. But when you have the kind of production, we talked about the percentages.
Yeah.
48, 41, 83. I mean, I think per 40, the production, it was like basically him and Zion. He averaged 40 points per 100 possessions. Like the dude's a bucket. We'll put it that way. But we're going to break down his game beyond that. Even though sometimes you could just be like, my guy's a bucket. And that's like perfectly fine analysis.
No, Corey, I just want to say before we preface all this, like, guys, this has been quite the experience. You guys have not seen our group chats. And you haven't seen how Corey's been talking about Brice and how Metcalf and Rucker and Nate and Maxwell have been fighting for him. It's been really, really interesting. It's kind of been like, it's either been a love fest or the player haters ball. And some of the guys at our website have been talking about him like he was Rosie O'Donnell or Osama bin Laden in that skit. But I think this is going to be a really interesting pod. And I'm really excited to hear all the things you have to say. And I can't wait for our Brice Sensabaugh haters to listen to this and what they'll have to say after. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, or watch, because, as always, we're going to break down some film. Yeah. But before we do that, we got to talk about the $10 that we're giving on it every episode. So I'm going to give you $10. Brice Sensabaugh, Dariq Whitehead, and Jet Howard.
How dare you?
3, bigger wings who are plus shooters.
Yeah. I hate this question. But
I know.
Sure. And Corey, you're for our listeners out there, you guys know this by now, but Corey is one of the most talented, most gifted people I know. But you creating the threesomes for these $10 activities is maybe your best skill. Stumps me every single time, even though I know it's coming. Here we go. I'm gonna go Jet Howard, $7 because he's my guy and I have him in the top 5. And if I have a top 5 guy, I should be giving him a vast majority of the money. So I'm going Jet Howard, $7. Brice Sensabaugh, $3. Dariq Whitehead, $0.00.
To shock you, I'm also going to give Dariq $0 in this trio. And we did Dariq's episode, and it was interesting. And he could shoot.
Yeah,
he could shoot, and I came away higher on his passing. I'm gonna give Brice $6.50.
Okay.
And I'm gonna give Jet $3.50.
Cool.
And I think those two are actually really interesting comparisons.
Yeah.
For what they offer, because there is a lot of parallels between the two. Conference, role, shooting, maybe some of the same weaknesses. But ultimately, I really like both of them a lot. There's something about Brice that I really, really like to watch. And look, we're gonna start with his defense. No, I'm just kidding.
I was ready for it.
No. Okay. This is not Jarris Walker or Derek Lively or something where this is
Definitely not.
This is Brice Sensabaugh. We're gonna start with some shooting. And I think if you mention Sensabaugh, the first thing that you're gonna talk about with the shooting is like mid-range killer, right? Like that's kind of the thing that everybody brings up, discusses with him, and I think that is for good reason, because his touch from that area, it's pretty insane, right? This is a guy who, when you look at that pull-up ability, it sure gets my mind going towards, looks like some NBA shot making. This is early in the year in the Maui Invitational, but little combo move. And people talk about sometimes Brice doesn't always get, a ton of space with his, his shots, but that is not the case here, as he, busts out a little ISO combo from the top of the key and crosses the defender out of his shoes and knocks down a little mid-range jumper.
Corey, I'd like to ask you a question, and I thought about this for a long time, and Brice haters are going to hate that I'm asking this question, but I want to ask you this question because this is, I can't shake it. And honestly, even me asking you this question kind of skews my overall ranking of him. When you did your eval for Devin Booker before he got drafted, what did you feel like his elite skill was?
I'm going to be honest. I wasn't digging deep into the draft at that point.
Okay. But like even now, like if you had to break down Devin Booker in your eyes, what do you think his like elite skills and tools are?
Well, I think in college, I would have said his off ball shooting, and like, he's kind of like the exact kind of wingy guy. I think we might see like Justin Edwards play a similar role to him at Kentucky, like the run a lot of that movement, the floppy stuff coming off pin downs, the stuff that Cal likes. Now, I think he's a 3-level scorer. I don't like he just has a complete offensive game.
Yeah. Does like defense ever come to mind when we're talking about Devin Booker?
I mean, now I don't think he's. I would say he competes. He's I don't think he's this lockdown defender by any stretch. Like I'm not putting him on Jimmy Butler while he's cooking or anything, but or expecting him to stop a guy who's cooking like that. But I don't feel bad about a matchup with Devin Booker on an island or anything.
But Corey, I think that's kind of my point. When I watch Brice, the more I watch Brice, look, I don't, please don't think that I'm saying that he's going to be Devin Booker. I'm not saying that at all, but he came to mind. And the reason why is when I watch Brice Sensabaugh and even the clips that you're playing right now, what I wrote in my notes is he's an absolute bully in the mid-range. And if we look at Brice Sensabaugh and we break him down, not an elite athlete, doesn't have like the quickest first step. Obviously, the detractors are going to talk about his quote unquote stocky build, like we've talked about. But for whatever reason, Brice Sensabaugh gets his shot off like all the time. He's an absolute maestro magician in the mid-range. Once again, he doesn't have elite for like quickness, but he has a tight enough handle. He uses his physique well, and he gets off these types of shots all the time. And he has that type of touch in the mid-range. So for me, Corey, it's hard to shake that and to think, okay, so my evaluation of Brice Sensabaugh, like I get it, defensively, he's not going to be your number one option. He's not going to be your, lockdown point of attack defender. But if he can, like you said about Booker, if he can compete and be a guy that, you're not like always freaking out about on the defensive side of the ball, then it's hard to shake this idea of Brice Sensabaugh not being an awesome player. So I apologize. I know you just wanted to talk about the shooting, but like as you were talking about the shooting and you played that clip, I'm like, dude, that move that you're highlighting, you're showing over and over again, like that's an NBA move. And he has that type of fluidity and that type of presence in the mid-range and the ability to get off his shot. So for me, just kind of starting off in the mid-range, like, yeah, he has an NBA ready mid-range game.
Yeah. And I think it's, funny that you brought up Devin Booker there. Now, I did write about Brice earlier in the year, and Devin Booker was one of the guys I kind of comped him to. But I think that we'll see. This is going to look pretty similar if you're following along at home, just coming off a little high ball screen and punishing drop coverage. First, it was Devin Booker getting it done. And, now Sensabaugh is going to come off the screen, get right to the nail. Defender can't get over in time. Knockdown.
Tough.
Yeah. And look, the mid-range is only dead for guys that aren't great at it.
The guys who can't hit it. Yeah, exactly.
Like Brice Sensabaugh is a really, really, really great mid-range shooter. So it's not dead for him. You know what I mean? Like this is something that he can go to and will go to throughout his career. I mean, he shot 50% from 17 feet out to the 3-point line per synergy. So, like this is a guy who feels really comfortable in these scenarios, and it's because he's so skilled. Now, here we are using that big frame.
Yeah, bully.
Now what he's doing here is he's getting the ball on the block, or a little bit in the short porch outside of it on the logo, backs down, nice and patient, and he gets to his spot. And this is something that I want to talk about with Brice, is space creation. And I want to talk about not space creation necessarily, but spot creation. And what I mean by that is when he is comfortably getting to his spot, you might think that he is like really, really covered and it's a bad shot, but he's comfortably shooting because he's so committed and understands what he's going to do when he gets there. So he's able to have a patience in the way that he operates there. If that makes
100%
sense.
Yeah. No, Corey, I'm definitely with you, and just I mean the patience, the power, the mentality, even to kind of get to that spot is unbelievable. And I just kind of going back to what you said, like, okay, you're about to highlight DeRozan, aren't you? Of course you are. And this is an NBA move, man. Like the footwork is unbelievable. Like there's nothing too flashy and amazing. And Corey, a point that I wanted to make before that I think resonates here too. People talk about like gravity in terms of like outside shooting, right? And when you talk about gravity as an outside shooter, people think of 3-point shooting exclusively. And I don't think that's it at all. If you watch the playoffs right now, what you highlighted before with that Booker play, a lot of teams will play drop coverage, and in drop coverage, if the big is sagging that much and you have an open mid-range shot like that, and you have an assassin like Devin Booker or DeMar DeRozan or whoever, or Jalen Brunson, that can hit that shot consistently, well, then suddenly that drop coverage isn't so good anymore. And that big is going to have to hard hedge. He's going to have to show. And that leads to different advantages for the driver then to exploit that all the way to the rim or draw fouls or whatever, or start to bend the defense in a different way. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the outside shot being just a 3-point shot that once again, we discredit that mid-range shot. And even here, the highlight that you're showing right now, like this is such a bully move from Brice, and his ability to use his size, his physique, which I guess we're using it in a different way this time than we usually do. But I mean, that space creation, spot creation that you're talking about is so effective for him. And I just don't see how that doesn't translate to the NBA, because it's not like he's doing this exclusively against like small, tinier guys. He could do this against almost anybody. So I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah. And it's not when we talk about him like, this bully move, but it's not just like, oh, he's so powerful that he's overpowering the defender. Like, look at the footwork.
Yeah.
Look how skilled he is. Look at the counters he has. Look at how when he gets he gets right to his spot, he feels how he's defending him. All right. So I'm gonna bring it back and kind of pause it. Let's get Zach Edey out of the way. The defender's guarding him so he can't turn into the middle of the floor.
Yeah.
Right. So Sensabaugh knows that, and he knows that when he spins, he's going to be able to create enough space here to get his look off cleanly, and that's a layup to him. And spoiler alert for the audience. Who have you bought stock in previously? For me, don't really need to do that segment later because I'm doing it now. To me, he is DeRozan with a modern twist, because ultimately, and this is this is almost a carbon copy of the play we just saw, from the fact that Brice and DeMar are both going to that same exact spot, turning their body, their back, and just using their size, their skill to get off a clean look. Now, the reason that I think some fans get frustrated with DeRozan, right, is because that's DeRozan's bread and butter. That is his sweet spot. That's what he feels comfortable with. But Brice is a guy that he has more. You know what I mean? Like, he is not just a guy who has to shoot mid-range shots, and that's the only way he can get his. He shot 41% from three on 11 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. So it's not even like he wasn't doing it on volume.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, filthy. Like, just he's. And I look at all the ways he'll be used in a different context.
Mm-hmm.
Little ball screen here. He's on a big. Can't stay in front of him. Because I think Brice, because of his size, because of his girth, because of that stocky build, he's going to be playing up and a little bit, and you're not gonna. And if you switch here,
nasty.
He's gonna punish that. He's gonna punish that.
Yeah. And Corey, I just want to say, going on Synergy and looking at his player details page and looking at the points per shot rating, and it's usually like good, elite, whatever.
Yeah.
Every field for his shooting is very good, like on every level,
or
like
excellent.
It's unbelievable, the type of shooter that he is, and I'm with you, man. And you know what, Corey, if you're gonna skip, what player you taken stock in before for later too, I'll just go with mine, because for me, there's a guy that plays in New York that is absolutely bossing this Knicks Cavs series, and his name is Jalen Brunson. And he's a guy who obviously is smaller than Brice, but a guy who, isn't an elite athlete. He's small. He's 6'1". Like, he's listed at 6'2". No one believes that shit. He's like 6 foot 6'1".
Yeah.
Right. Similar build to Brice.
Stocky. Yes.
Not known as an elite defender, but he just kind of dictates the terms of basketball when he's on the court, and he is doing so much for this team. But look at the way he scores. That play that you showed with Brice and DeRozan on the left side of the court, Brunson does the same thing, but on the right side of the court.
Right.
Like, he'll back you down, and if you're going to shade him outside, he's going to spin and take that jumper on the baseline, and it goes in almost every goddamn time. Like, he's that good of a scorer. And look, and you're showing another Booker thing here, and that's the thing with Brice is that I love what you said about him being a DeRozan with a modern twist, or you showing the Booker stuff here right now as well, is because he is such a goddamn good shooter off the catch. And he really is good off the dribble as well. He's an unbelievable shooter. And I think we do this pod every single week, Corey, and we generally bring up a lot of the same talking points when it comes to what NBA teams are looking for. And when you're that good of a scorer and you can shoot it that well from outside, both off the catch and with the ball in your hands off the dribble, that's special stuff. And that's stuff that honestly isn't really apples for apples when you're comparing skills to skills. It truly is an elite skill that he has. And I think NBA teams are going to feel exactly the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the conversations that I've had with people, that are in the NBA, I think, I mean, look, I think people are in or out on Brice typically, but I think there are some smart organizations that I've spoken to that I think he's really skilled. So, I think a lot of it will come back maybe to one, how much they believe he has it in him to get in better shape, and then the knee. Because I do think, him getting into elite shape, and that's part of the bet that I would take on him in that like 5 to 6 range. Part of the bet is that, okay, if this dude gets into much better shape, he jumps a level, and that's a dangerous player. Now, we showed that Booker clip before coming off the screen, and we have a big here. This is very similar, kind of somewhat guarding at the level, but playing off a little bit. And like with a shooter like Sensabaugh or Devin Booker, you can't really do that. You have to commit one way or the other, and that defender, just like Cat is stuck in no man's land. And Sensabaugh is able to just punish this, just like Devin Booker was. So I think that he could play and act as a shooter with the ball in his hand. But then I think, and I want to go back to Devin Booker for a minute, you can run him off of little actions like this, where he can come off movement. And this is that kind of like Kentucky Booker, that we were talking about earlier, where he's, coming off screens and playing off of Chris Paul and doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands to thrive. And I think Brice has that in his game too. Like, this is a guy, who you could use setting screens and running all over the floor and just run him to the wing, catch and shoot. He's going to be a threat as a shooter from everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I kind of hate how this happens to me a lot. Like you have some like control over me, Corey, or whatever, but we do these pods and we talk about players, and you're so convincing about these guys, and I'm feeling you, man. Like I did the deep dive, like a real thorough deep dive for this pod, and I walked away thinking, like, dear God, like I don't see how an NBA team doesn't fall in love. And we haven't talked about his defense yet, and obviously there are some warts to his defense, but even that, like, I walked away, I was like, do I really hate it as much as I think I hate it? I don't think so, but at least here on the offensive side of the ball, like, these are NBA skills that teams want and teams are looking for. I just watch the playoffs, guys. Like, teams are looking for bench scorers. They're looking for guys to come off the bench and be able to have an influence on the game. Obviously, you talk about the NBA as a superstars league. For sure, you need your superstars to be successful in the playoffs. But the teams that keep pushing on and advancing in the playoffs have these guys that can also come in and dictate terms when, the 7th, 8th, 9th man is in. And I think from day one, Sensabaugh could be a guy that you'd feel pretty good about bringing off the bench. And then eventually, obviously, with the skills that he has, he could become a number 1, number 2 option one day as well. And if we're talking about a guy with that type of upside and ceiling, then how could you not have him in your top 10? Kind of becomes the next question.
Now, we were kind of high on Cam Thomas during his draft. And look, when he plays and he's given the rock 40 balls, right? Like, in this NBA, he could score the rock. And the difference in Cam Thomas is like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah.
Brice Sensabaugh is 6'6" and built, so he could handle the physicality, I think, on the other end a little bit better. He's long. And he's more than okay playing off the ball too. And Cam much prefers to dance with it. But this off the ball, not needing the ball in his hands stuff from Sensabaugh, I think, is huge. Look, 49% on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers. Put him next to your star.
That's
like
sick.
He's a legit floor spacer. You're going to have to close out hard on him. Then with the ball in his hands, 46.2% in isolations. I mean, the 51.5% on post-ups. Dude is just an efficiency monster. You know what I mean? So, like, when I look at him, like you said, I think he is going to find a way to contribute on the offensive side of the ball right away as he learns how to play that, that full on NBA game. And look, it's, we've talked a lot about how efficient and effective he is. And I think that, there are areas offensively where clearly he needs to get better at, right? Like, I think for somebody of his stature, I think that this is a guy who should be, finishing better
Yeah.
than he does. Now, he's not bad. He was 57%
Mhm.
overall, but 51% in the half court. So he's a guy who, look, he's he's not like completely ground bound. Like he
Mhm.
can put you, on a poster when he has a runway, but
Yes.
ultimately, like with the type of rim protectors in the league, like yeah, I think he's going to have to look at a possession like this where he's got a guy who's big and is an NBA athlete and mobile and can switch and guard him, who's bigger than him. If you stop it right here, he's just going straight up here. So it's Coleman
Mhm.
Hawkins and Brice Sensabaugh right on the block in the paint. Sensabaugh's about to go up. He's got to just dip that shoulder
Yeah.
and create that space so he can extend and finish. But instead, he goes up. I don't want to say soft because he's attacking the rim, and I think he just thinks he has the advantage to get that
Mhm.
off, right? But ultimately, it leads to him getting swatted. So there are definitely areas where he has to show more. But I also think that there's a lot of potential there.
The two things that I had in my notes, Corey, in terms of his finishing at the rim, number one, um, clearly he does lack a lead burst.
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah,
he
for sure.
has a runway, then yeah, he could put a guy in a poster like the one against Illinois was unbelievable in transition.
Yeah.
But I do think like in a half court sense, like yeah, he's got to work on that. And it's not even that he has to work on his burst per se, but like you said, right, being more savvy about bumping into guys and kind of creating that space. The second thing that I wrote about is he needs to improve that left hand. There are a
Mm,
lot of times when he's driving left and he would easily have a nice left hand bucket, but he goes back to his right and that hurts him a
yes.
little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was the main critique I had for him in finishing at the rim.
And I think that those are totally fair because, he doesn't have that burst. He is a guy who much so prefers to, attack with craft. And here, he gets to the rim. But what I'm highlighting on the clip that I'm playing now
The
is
rim
how
protect.
he is creating that space. So when he gets the ball and he's in the corner here, he's going to hit his defender with a little shimmy. And this is kind of like his go-to move to kind of get his defender off balance before. And it's something that, they should be teaching more, or maybe they are, and the kids just aren't absorbing it like they used to, not to sound a million years old, but when you face up and you get like in a 3-point stance and you hit him with a jab step and you get your shoulders rocking and you don't have to put the ball on the floor before you know what you're doing, right? And that's what he's going to do on this clip here. He's going to hit little, just gets him leaning with
Mhm.
that little shoulder shrug to create that separation, that okay, I don't have a ton of burst, so I'm going to win with craft. And that's something that we had talked about with Kobe Buffkin. He's another
Mhm.
guy, right, that
Yeah.
has to win with craft. So that's kind of Bryce's go-to, and a little bit here and goes to the left, but like you said, that's not something he's doing necessarily on the regular.
Yeah, but I mean, Corey, to his credit, like you mentioned, like he does have these types of move in his back to get to the rim, but also like he shot at a pretty good percentage this year, and that's without him having that elite burst or being in elite NBA shape, right? Like we've talked about, and I think that's because he does have good touch, right? Although, as I mentioned before, this is a left-hand layup. I wish he did more of that, considering that it seems like he can do it. But I just like the fact that he has good touch around the rim, and he is one of these guys that is the classic. Does that he knows how to mess with your tempo or your internal clock in terms of his drives. Does the classic like jab and then jab go type of stuff to really kind of get you on your toes, and that stuff is going to be important for him because, as we've mentioned a million times, he does have a strong frame and a bigger build, and so if he can just keep you on your toes with his shooting and with the hesitations and jab moves and stuff like that, then yeah, he's going to be a successful driver of the ball even without having the elite athleticism or burst, and that stuff comes with time and experience and coaching as well.
Yeah, and ultimately, because he's such a good shooter, you do have to
Oh
play up
yeah.
on him. You can't give him that room, and you have to kind of respect it. And as far as the finishing and how he could use his body, I think this is a good example of how you do that. right? And this is DeMar DeRozan, the full-fledged version on the Bulls, who's this, unbelievable finisher and mid-range shooter and scorer, and is, been in the league for a million years now. And he's, using this crafty kind of finish where he's going to go into Malcolm Brogdon's chest, and then he's going to finish with his offhand and with the extension. And we see that here. This is something that we see here, using his body to shield the defender from making a play on the ball. So, look, does he need to get better at finishing? Certainly. But when I'm looking at certain flashes for him, and I see things like this in his bag, and I go, all right, he already has the frame, but he needs to get it into better shape. And if he just slims down a little bit, he's still going to be a big, strong dude. He's not going to all of a sudden look like Chet Holmgren because he loses a little bit of weight, right? That's not the kind of frame that he has. He's always going to be strong. So he just needs to get better at this. And sometimes when we're watching these guys, especially when we're watching them compared to their NBA counterparts that we're comparing them to, we look at the full-fledged, fully formed, fully evolved Pokemon version of the NBA player versus the college prospect of the guys that we're breaking down. And when we do that, we're not being fair to them. But when I see the glimpses of it, I can project, all right, well, 6 years down the line, maybe this is something he goes to regularly.
Corey, number one, Pokemon reference. Are you kidding me? That was unbelievable. Automatically, I thought of like, what's that freaking Charizard? And how he's like the final form. He's all cut
Charmander
up. But Charmander's kind of like doughy, little fluffy dude, and he's like, small little flamethrower stuff. But I'm with you, man. Like Brice. Just a little bit of NBA conditioning and he's going to look so different, but the frame is there, dude. Like the shoulders are gigantic. He's clearly always been like a bigger dude. So yeah, he's never going to be Chet. No matter what he does, he'll never be Chet. And I'm with you, man. Like if the flashes are there, then there's enough to get excited. And NBA program, NBA dieting, and the NBA everything that we say on every freaking pod. But I believe it with him. Like I actually do believe it. And if he didn't have touch, then we'd call that out. But he actually has touch. And so if it's a matter of him getting in slightly better shape and working on like little nuance and that stuff comes with coaching and time and experience. And he's going to go up and get his shot blocked just violently by a couple of guys, Robert Williams, Mitchell Robinson, whoever, Gobert, Kessler, whatever. Like these things will happen and he'll learn from it. He'll learn how to put his chest, his shoulder into guys and create better space. And he's only going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think, maybe the extra spacing on, an NBA floor also helps a little bit to counterbalance it. These are all things to consider. Shout out to everybody watching live on the YouTube channel. Shout out to everybody listening on the podcast feed. If you're watching live on the YouTube channel, make sure you smash that like button, man. Throw a thumbs up for your boy. Shout out to CP at Knicks Fan TV. They're having a grand old time over there. Let's talk about his playmaking a little bit, because I think that he's got this reputation as he is a scorer, right? He's this high usage guy who puts the ball in the hoop, and that's all he could do. And I don't think that's fair. It's not completely unfair, but I also don't think it's fair. I think his role at Ohio State, it started out, it was just like, hey, I want you to come off the bench and I want you to go be our, microwave guy, except microwave guys are typically a little streaky and he just was always on. It took like until like the final month of the season for him to have a down game. But I think at the next level, I think his passing is going to evolve because the passing flashes that he's shown. And look, when you look at the raw 1.2 assists per game or whatever that he's averaging, you also have to realize he's only playing 24 and a half minutes per game. So like, it's not going to be exponentially better if he played 33 minutes per game, but it would look a little bit less like dire than it does just based on his minutes per game that he played. But I've seen some flashes, man, and the flashes excite me. They do. They excite me a lot. And we talk about Brice, the post player. Well, what do guys need to do out of the post in order to operate there in the league? You can't just if you could score at an insane clip, you might be able to go to work. But eventually guys are going to double down. They're
Right.
going to show different coverages at you. So how are you going to make them pay? And I think that, Sensabaugh is a guy who not only can he score out of there, this is a really slick one-handed live dribble hit to the weak side out of the post, timed perfectly before the help comes. I mean, this is big time stuff. He doesn't get an assist here, but does that make that pass, not really, really slick?
Yeah. No, dude, it's almost like he has a sixth sense here. Like, how did he know? How did he feel that?
Great court awareness.
I know exactly, and I'm with you, Corey. Like, I don't know if I got to where you got to exactly in terms of his passing, and also like ultimately, I don't think you're saying that he's going to be like an elite playmaker and average 8
No.
to 10 assists per game. Yeah. So okay, then I absolutely am with you. I think he's going to be good. Like, I think he's going to be a really good passer. And my thing is this: like, I feel like all the elite scorers, like, they understand their gravity. And it feels like Sensabaugh is one of these guys where he understands that even as a freshman, like, these defenses were like pretty spooked by how good of a scorer he. Look at this, like, the doubles come in once again and just an absolute dime. And I think like he's one of these guys. He knows, he understands how good he is as a scorer, and he understands that comes with, as you mentioned, right, doubles and different packages and sets coming for him. And I think from what we saw, he was good enough. He was a more than good enough passer. Obviously, not a guy that you're expecting to average a high number of assists, but if you're making passes like this, that's more than good enough. And also will just continue to open up more opportunities for you to score as well, because defenses will be scared to kind of send that double as much.
Yeah, and look, we've talked about DeMar DeRozan, we talked about Devin Booker. These are guys who are not playmakers coming into the league. They were not considered playmakers. They were considered guys who didn't have playmaking skills. That would be their weaknesses. And both of those guys now can really, really pass the ball. So when I'm looking and trying to project, like, Cam Thomas never wanted to pass the ball. You know what I mean? He just didn't want to pass it. He didn't show a ton of flashes that encouraged you. For me, I see some really slick passing in the timing, in the cadence, in the pace, coming off a ball screen, big slips, perfect timing. He goes over, throws it over the top. He's got good size. The floor is actually spaced pretty well here. He, is a threat. That's a nice, slick pick and roll that he hits the roll man.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty, and ultimately, as like a secondary guy, he's got an unbelievable skill set. Like, his toolbox is unbelievable. If you're not going to be asking him to be like your number one creator, and he's doing this type of stuff, like, that's so exciting. Look, he gets it, man. He's coming over. He understands the help's coming. Sees weak side corners wide open. Bang. I'm with you, dude.
And he's being used here as a screener, and I think he's going to be used as like this small ball 4. And here he's making a pass out of the short roll. Like, slips it, gets downhill, help comes, and he doesn't hesitate. That's a great look with high feel. I mean, he had some moments as a passer, and it's just like, all right, how do we set him up in situations to get this out of him more often? And I think the NBA will evolve into that.
Oh, well, that's just silly.
What
are we even talking about?
So, if you're listening, he's going to get Ohio State gets the offensive rebound. He attacks a closeout, collapses 4 shirts into the paint, and makes like a Tyrese Halliburton mid-air
laser beam
to the weak side corner. Look at this.
Oh my God.
Everybody's attention on him.
Yeah.
And knows exactly where his guys are.
It's a perfect pass too.
Perfect. On the money. Like, it's that live dribble stuff where I'm like, like, there's something here as a passer. He has this really good feel and court awareness, and understands like where, like, spacing and where guys are. Like, even here, fits that into a little window for a drop off. Like, these are passes. It's like, all right, in totality, he's not averaging 1 million assists per game, but I'm seeing stuff that makes me go, all right, he's going to be able to leverage his scoring to make plays for his teammates. And that's all I really care about with him as a playmaker, is how is he going to be able to leverage that scoring? And when I see stuff like that, where he's hitting the cutter because the defense is focused on him, or when I see a possession like this here, where he's able to get into the paint, gets a paint touch midair, drop off to the big, like I see stuff like this. I think he showed it enough to get me excited about 6-7 years down the line. He's not just going to be a chucker or a guy that you need to get buckets. He's going to be able to actually make teams pay for paying too close attention to him.
Yeah. I mean, the clip you showed before, like that number one, that cut was unbelievable, but also
great cut. Great cut.
And then here in this play against Northwestern, like the little, oh God, his head fake is good too. I don't know if we talked about that, but
he's slithery. Slithery. He uses all that craft. He's one of the craftiest guys in the draft. I mean, I'm looking at, the playoffs now. And look, I do not by any means want to diminish how important athleticism is to NBA basketball, high level NBA basketball. But it's like, how many freak athletes are like winning their series right now? It's like the Nuggets aren't winning because Aaron Gordon is a freak athlete. You know what I mean? They're winning because all of their guys are skilled. Philly, maybe they're winning. I mean, really, Joel Embiid is just a freak physical specimen, and Tyrese Maxey, good athlete, not a freak.
Not a freak.
Just a really skilled dude, right? Shot maker. Miami, nobody on that team is I think Bam maybe, but like he's not having the best series. Jimmy is a really good athlete at this point of his career. He's not a freak. He's just super skilled and knows his strengths. I mean, Phoenix, the Suns, those guys are all super skilled. There's no freak athletes in Golden State. Ja Morant's team is down 3-1. Although I guess, Anthony Davis and LeBron, are still freak athletes. So, but, look, there are, of course, outliers. But I think what we're seeing is most of the guys who are contributing at a high level in the playoffs are super skilled, plus size, feel, craft, all that stuff. And I think Sensabaugh has that kind of stuff to him.
Yeah. Corey, there's a team that's going to be drafting around number 10, maybe 11, depending on, if it goes to 11, then I'll go to the Knicks. But like Dallas could use a Sensabaugh, dude. Like they've been looking for a running mate for Luka for years, but you talk about Sensabaugh and his shooting ability, secondary playmaking at 6'6", that sounds like a pretty good match to me. He'll play off ball, can shoot it off the catch, as we've highlighted. Would be unbelievable.
Yeah. Look, Dallas can use a lot of guys right now.
Yeah.
They could use a lot of guys right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what they even do with their the pick. If they keep it or do they trade it for more immediate help, and if that'll hurt them down the line. Who knows, right? All right, I think it's time now to talk about his defense, right?
Sure.
And this is the main area where I think if you're low on him, you're like, look, I get it. He's the most efficient wing in the draft. He could shoot. He can create his own shot. I get all that, but he can't defend at all. And I think you do need to be able to defend in the NBA. We just had another conversation with our guy Colby Jones, and we talked about not only can he play the offensive side of the ball and contribute in a ton of ways, but he also is a really strong defender who's versatile. So it's not to say that defense is most certainly important, but Brice Sensabaugh is not even in the NBA yet. And he has time to get better, and he has time to work on his conditioning and his body and some of the things that he might struggle with, because ultimately I think that the defense is kind of pretty good on the ball. I think he's pretty good on the ball. You know, he moves for a guy his size. He moves. He flips his hips. He could stay with smaller guys, and ultimately, like when you have a body like that, and you're banging and you're hip to hip with him, this is a good possession. You know, he's getting this guy going middle to the left and just throwing up junk because he's a big, strong dude.
Yeah.
You know, like he moves. He moves his feet. I think on the ball, when he only has one specific thing to focus on, it looks really good a lot of times. All of his numbers on defensively, or the vast majority of all his numbers on synergy, all check out and rate really well. And that's not the end all be all at all. The tape on this end especially is way more important. But I mean, look, he's calling things out. He's active. And here he's ISO'd again. He's got a bigger wing on him, flips his hip, bodies up, sends him right into the help.
Yeah.
It's a good defensive possession.
I'm gonna give him a backhanded compliment, but he's not Malachi Branham. Is what I'll say. And it's interesting, when we did the Branham pod last year, I was like, oh, I thought he was like okay, whatever, and you went to town on him, and then I did another deep dive, and I was like, yeah, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he is terrible at defense. But watching Sensabaugh, I don't get that feeling. Like, no. I get it. He's not a good defender. I'm not gonna jump on the mic here and just to make him feel good or you feel good say that I thought he was a good defender. No, he obviously has his warts, right? But I mean, for all the stuff that we talked about on the offensive side of the ball, right? He's gonna be in NBA conditioning and NBA dieting and whatever. He's gonna get a little bit lighter on his feet. I feel like the strength and the length stuff is there, and I felt like, especially on the ball, I thought he competed was the biggest thing I wanted to say. So this is not me saying I think he was a lockdown defender or Kobe Jones or anything like that, but I did feel like, because there is a bit of a foundation to him, and I think he's always going to be strong, he's always going to be long, and I think he's going to compete in this way. I just don't want to say that I think he's going to be a terrible defender. I think he can be at least an average to above average defender is kind of where I ended up landing.
Yeah, all he has to do is just not get killed, not get targeted, and I don't think you're going to be able to target him. Like, now, Jalen Pickett makes this shot. Is this bad defense?
No, that's also Jalen Pickett's game.
Not at all. This is a really good defensive possession, if anything. And they're gonna get Sensabaugh switched onto him off the ball screen, but look at him. He's gonna stop the drive, switches his hips, doesn't really bite on the fake. He gets an extension, and it's just like a tough fadeaway mid-range shot. Like, you're gonna mostly live with stuff like that, right? Like, I think where he gets, kind of hurt the most are on these kinds of possessions where there are maybe like miscommunications or guys are like, you have to think a little bit, like right here. Like, I don't even know what happens there. He just gets kind of blown by. I guess he thinks that, there's going to be a switch. They're in transition here. They pull it out. He seems like he kind of forgets for a second. Like he gets like brain fog that, his man is actually, going to be driving the ball for a layup. So it's like stuff like that. And look, that's not good by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, you don't want guys who are just like having these brain fart moments. But I don't know. I don't think there are so many of them that it's like they outweigh the offense. And I feel like a lot of the dialogue is kind of similar to like the AJ Griffin dialogue last year, where everyone was like, he's such a terrible defender. But I was like, no, I don't think he is. And like, I think he tries hard and he has like good tools, and there are just like things he needs to clean up. And like, this is something that Brice right here needs to clean up. This possession here, he's going to ultimately end up guarding the strong corner, little DHO, right? So he's strong corner, pick and roll. He doesn't tag because it's not his job. The shooter is lift to the wing, and he overcommits on this dig here. And by the time he actually
Recovers.
is able to recover and get back to the corner, it's a knockdown shot. So like that's something that in the NBA, like your coach is going to take you out of the game. And I think sometimes that, happened to him at Ohio State. But I mean, like it happens to young guys. Like these guys are not these perfect prospects. But when you have a guy who does give effort consistently, I think that kind of stuff is fixable in the film room. Another area where I thought he was really good, chasing shooters around the floor. And, I want to show a ball screen a little bit where I think, an area he needs to improve. But like, this is where he kind of uses his big frame to just kind of get through guys. That's a really good contest.
Yeah.
Chasing around a shooter. And look, he can't do that all game. There's a few reasons he played 25 minutes per game, right? His conditioning is going to have to improve. His body is going to have to improve. But he moves, he chases guys, he gives effort. It's stuff that I look at, I'm like, all right, I think that there's some stuff to work with here, man.
I think, Corey, a big part of it too is that last part that you mentioned. He looks heavy on a lot of these possessions, and I don't necessarily mean that in like the worst way. I also think like it's just it could be an aesthetic thing too, just because he's such a big body guy and he's trying to get his weight moving in a certain direction, and it's a lot, and so him being heavier on that side is going to hurt him. And especially like you mentioned that he competes against smaller guards, but also, like it wasn't easy for him either, guarding those smaller guards that are faster and quicker. I love everything that you said about the footwork and him being able to flip the hips and all that stuff, but also like him being heavier made it harder. And especially I thought in screen navigation, like the one that you showed was a good example of him getting through, but also there are a lot of times where it was harder for him, and that conditioning needs to be there. And he's got to, we'll call it for what it is. Like he's got to lose a little bit of weight. And I think it's going to help him.
Most definitely.
It's definitely going to help him on both ends of the floor. And it just, even in a possession like this one, he kind of gets eaten up by the screen there.
But it's good defense. Like,
I
mean, look, he has to curl over it, and he's still getting, a look off. Jet's just a tall shooter who is really good off movement. It doesn't mean it was bad defense.
No, for sure.
Because what happens if he goes under that? Like, then there's an open look. You can't do that, right? But I think what you are saying about, kind of the screen navigation, and I thought when he was doing it off movement, he had a little bit of momentum. It was a little bit easier for him in those scenarios. Like, this scenario here where he just gets pinned, right? Like, and for a guy who is as strong as he is, he should be able to get through that a little bit easier. But also, you do have to anticipate these kind of actions, because at the next level, like this is going to happen really quick. I mean, it happens quick here. It's like just a quick action, and if
he's just eliminated,
and there are guys in the NBA who are going to make that shot way more often than anybody is in college. You know what I mean? So look, he's got a lot of stuff that he does have to work on that end, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the dude, I think, offers so many positives offensively with enough flashes on the other side of the ball for me to buy in that he is going to get better. Enough flashes as a passer, which I'm actually like, hey, like I would bet on him getting better. And that's what makes me pretty outlier level high. And I want to shout out our own draft deeper, Nathan Grubel, who I think gave one of my favorite draft takes of this entire draft cycle. When he said that, and we were on a scouting trip, we were going to see, I believe, Taylor Hendricks take on Temple, and we were talking about Sensabaugh, and he said, I think Brice Sensabaugh is this draft's Alperen Şengün. And I just thought that take was so interesting because obviously we're not talking about him in play style, right? Like Şengün is like this uber efficient post player who's like finishing on these like crafty little hook shots, and then he's like making these like Jokic-esque passes, right? But it's like this guy who was really super productive at a really young age, who had this skill set that was like, if you looked at it through a certain lens, you could be like, all right, it's an outdated play style. But if you looked at it with the modern lens, you could be like, oh, it's actually a very modern play style because of, all the playmaking stuff that he was able to do. Maybe some defensive concerns, but ultimately the production and the fact that he showed such an interesting skill set on the offensive side of the ball that if you put him on an NBA floor, he was going to still be productive, and that production is going to outweigh the negative stuff. And Şengün slipped to pick 16 outside the lottery. And I think if you went back and you redrafted, he would go much higher. So I shout out to Nathan for that take. I think it's very apt in the perception of Brice Sensabaugh with a lot of people.
No, for sure, Corey. That's a great take, actually. Kind of jealous I haven't had one of those yet, but
you have more than enough good takes.
I want to say, Corey, I think where I'm landing, and it's time we're kind of going to start landing the ship here, landing the plane here. But something I've been thinking about was we've talked about a lot of NBA players while going through this episode about Sensabaugh. We mentioned DeRozan, Booker, Brunson, all these guys. And I think the biggest thing that is coming to mind right now is when we thought about those guys before they reached their peak forms. I don't think we ever talked about those guys being elite defenders or even really good defenders, and I'm not saying that to excuse Brice Sensabaugh on that side of the floor. What I'm saying is he's such a unique talent on the offensive floor that if he just shows a little bit of growth on the defensive side, then I think all those concerns are all just going to kind of wash away. Like, he is such a versatile, dynamic, just potent offensive player that if he could just get to average on the defensive side of the ball, then we're talking about a really, really, really interesting and could be just an amazingly productive player on the next level. So I think you've definitely sold me on him a ton. And I feel a lot better about his eval now than I did even before. So I don't know if I hate you for this, but he's really good, man, is where I'm landing.
Yeah. And so I don't think we need to do a sell me this pen, because I think it's pretty easy. Are you interested in a guy who is, the most efficient freshman wing in college basketball, who could score at all three levels, has shown some playmaking potential, and is a pretty good defender on the ball and needs to clean up some stuff, but ultimately is, going to thrive in the NBA. Right. God forbid his, knees hold up. And we have no idea if like the knee issue is anything like that's going to hamper him long term, right? This is just we talk, and we don't have access to those medical records, but let's hope that everything holds up on that end. But I do want to ask if there are any teams, and you talked about maybe the Mavericks, but if there are any teams in particular in this, let's call it, 9 to 17 range. So we have the Utah Jazz, who, if you read some of the comments on the No Ceilings YouTube mock draft that we did, Jazz fans not happy that Maxwell and Nathan drafted Brice Sensabaugh in the lottery there. So we have the Jazz, we have the Mavericks, we have the Magic via the Bulls, we have the Thunder, we have the Raptors, the Pelicans, the Hawks, and the Lakers in that range. Are there any teams that stick out as like, they would really be able to maximize his game?
I just I know this team is really young and they have a lot of guys, and it feels like, hey, I would love to see him on the Thunder. I get it. They have a lot of guys who touch the ball, and J-Dub was unbelievable for them in year one, but J-Dub was almost like a jumbo wing for them, the way that they were using him.
A lot of power forward.
Yeah. Giddey, Shea, unbelievable with the ball and their passing. I wouldn't mind adding Sensabaugh shooting to that team. Like I feel like adding some more shooting to that Thunder team wouldn't hurt at all. Maybe I'm crazy. I like that fit, actually. The Thunder. Obviously, I mentioned the Mavericks before. I think that Mavericks could look to add a lot of things, but adding a guy like Sensabaugh next to Luka, I don't think would hurt. But yeah, the Thunder was the first one that came to mind.
And I think that they're the type of team that values, his kind of archetype, right? Like that versatile, big size, can do a lot of things, put the ball on the floor, can play on or off the ball. I am really hoping he lands in Orlando.
Okay.
With that second pick.
Okay.
If the Bulls don't move into the top 4 and the Magic end up, in that 11, 12 range, depending on if anybody else moves up, we talk about a lot of these kind of like 2 guards, because I think that Markelle Fultz is, when he's healthy, he does a really good job as Orlando's point guard. And I don't think they're in dire need of a point guard. Like a lot of times we hear that dialogue. But we also see a lot of times like these big jumbo forwards get mocked to Orlando. And like, how many of those guys can you have where they all play?
Yeah.
Like I get that like Franz is like this Swiss Army knife on both sides of the ball, but like ultimately like you want him to play like swinging between the 3 and 4. Paulo, offensively is probably swinging between like point forward, point guard, power forward, small forward-ish guy, and he's even going to play some center.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have Jonathan Isaac, you have Wendell Carter, like you have all of these big guys that are really going to mostly defend in that front court space. So I don't know if those big jumbo wings are the move to go to. But a guy like Brice Sensabaugh, who still has good positional size and doesn't need the ball in his hands,
Mm-hmm.
can play off the ball, but also when it's crunch time, he can go get a bucket. Orlando can also, I think, kind of cover some of the quote unquote defensive deficiencies that you would, kind of say that he has. I really think that, and he's from the area, if I'm not mistaken. He's from Orlando. So, and hometown kid going to the Magic. This is on top of they have, a pick that is, projected without the lottery so far to be the 6th pick in the draft. If he's the second piece that they are able to add, whew, oh boy. Oh man. Because that kid produced and he fits that roster like a glove. And if he made it to Orlando, he would most likely be the top guy on my personal board. So I think they'd be getting great value.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really good spot.
I'm with that, man. I like everything that you said. Fit wise, it makes a ton of sense for sure. At this point, I just want to see him in the NBA. Like that's just kind of where I'm at right now. Like I just want to see what that offensive game looks like on the next level, considering all that he was able to flash in college. So that fit with Orlando's great. They got Suggs over there too. And what he's going to offer defensively and stuff like that. So I'm with you, man. 100%.
Yeah. It's going to be really fun. All right. This was a fun episode. I'm glad that I finally got to defend my guy Brice Sensabaugh. Shout out Nathan and Maxwell on the squad. Albert, tell the people where they could find you.
Oh, you can find me at Alberto_Gim is where you can find me on Twitter. On Instagram, I'm at GTGNBA is where you can find me. Before we go, I just wanted to give a special shout out to my NLVC family. We are playing in a huge football tournament this Saturday, and that's why I'm getting really tan, because I've been practicing in the sun. You can see there's a big contrasting color here between my chest and my neck, but excited to be playing on Saturday. Hopefully we win another trophy. That would be back-to-back, and that'd be pretty awesome for us.
Let's go. And shout out mid-30s.
Oh, thank you, Corey. I was about to say that too. If I can really quickly, mid-30s is just a little culture fashion account that we started because we wanted to create our own clothing line for our friends and family. So we'll be dropping some stuff soon. So come follow us on Instagram at M30s is where you can find us.
Must follow for the memes. usage so far. And I know the fashion. I know the actual stuff's going to be fire. You can find me at Corey Tulaba on Twitter, at the NBA Draft Dude on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. Make sure that you check out our latest mock draft. We did a live mock where we did 4 teams. And we picked, we spread those out amongst all the teams in the NBA, and we did like 2 minutes each on the clock. And Albert and I teamed up. The Tylers teamed up. Nathan and Maxwell. Nick was solo. Steven hosted. It was a lot of fun. Check that out on the YouTube. You could also listen to it in full if you haven't already on the podcast stream, which if you're listening to the podcast, please make sure that you rate, review, subscribe, and that 5-star rating, really help us out. We appreciate everybody. We have some fun stuff coming as the draft nears. Albert, I saw we got the finalized draft guide cover, and I think it's going to blow people away. You should get excited. My guy, Matt Skiff, designed it. He used to be like the lead designer at Huff Skateboards. My favorite artist. Dude absolutely crushed the vision that I had for it. So very excited to share that with everybody.
I can't freaking wait. Let's go.
It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Until next week, y'all. Make sure you check out our Colby Jones interview, which will be dropping soon as well. But we're out. Peace.
Peace.